Is there any public comment on it or any questions? All right, well, thanks. Thank you. Okay, appreciate it. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye. 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 Chair votes aye. Thank you. Okay. Move on to item H3.
Mr. Chairman, Maury Anderson from Planning and Building Services. What you have before you is action requested is to receive the memorandum of understanding and approve said MOU and authorize the county administrative officer to sign it. It was before the board some time ago. The Rancheria has requested our help in doing plans, examination, and inspection services. They don't have the ability to do it themselves. They're proposing, I think right now, less than a dozen homes, but it could be more, it could be less. We are very interested in providing that service. We have worked extensively with our outside counsel in having this MOU be airtight, and we believe that it has all the protections that the building code would, as we can be on federal lands when we do these inspections. We thought it was very important to get those sewn up. And the only distinction would be, the only difference that's going to be happening at the Rancheria versus out in Lassen County is they are not going to be required to have the sprinkler system as we are by the Uniform Building Code here in the rest of the state. So lucky them, too bad for us. But we are very enthusiastic to move forward. They're already starting to look at foundations, and they want to get going, and it's getting late. So we recommend you approve said MOU.
I'll make the motion to approve the MOU.
You find a typo, Mr. Chapman?
No, I was just, it's a formatting thing that's kind of humorous, leverage to overthrow the, that would be a good one.
I know that they're a sovereign nation, but what authority do you have?
We can find out from the court.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. Thanks, Marty. Okay, we'll move down to H4.
Mr. Chairman, this item involves the Honey Lake Valley Recreation Authority's request to transfer a portion of county property to the Recreation Authority for the purpose of building a pool. We've got a map here that kind of depicts the site. Most of you know that the JPA has selected the Roosevelt pool site as the site of the pool. That site is...
Well, no, that's not totally true. We actually selected the backside of the county site for the new pool, but we're acquiring the old pool site and want to create a very small parcel.
Right. And so the Roosevelt pool site is right here, which I understand the JPA is in negotiations or maybe has some sort of agreement to purchase that. That site in and of itself is not big enough to house the proposed pool and so forth. So they've requested that the county transfer a portion of the county-owned property to that, to be combined with that parcel to make a large enough parcel for the intended project. I've met with the city administrator on a couple of occasions and discussed the constraints we would have with that site. Mainly being, the sheriff has a storage facility here that the access is through this gate here. This Roosevelt Annex is used by the Health and Social Services Department. They've got their fleet of vehicles parked in this parking lot that currently extends out to here. In discussing with our staff and with the city administrator, we come up with a couple of potential options for where we might place the line. My recommendation is in your packet and is identified as option 3. And essentially comes along the line of the gate down to here, over, and provides access for the sheriff's facility. It also allows enough remaining parking to make the Roosevelt Annex still usable for our staff or whatever eventual purpose that building's used for. The city administrator and I think the JPA has requested more than that, but I'm afraid that if we move that line too far over here, we render the remaining parcel useless or close to, not having adequate parking for whatever eventual use that is. So I've outlined a couple of items I think should be considered if the county is inclined to deed that property. One of them is to obtain a survey of the property at the authority's expense to identify property corners and where those would be. 2 is to condition the transfer upon the eventual construction of a pool. In other words, if they don't build it, they don't get it, or if they pick another site or whatever. 4 would be to condition it upon the authority constructing a fence along the new property line, whatever that is, to create a barrier from the remaining county-owned property to the pool. And also, another point, there are 2 underground fuel tanks located on the property that would be transferred to the JPA. Our understanding is that those are 10,000-gallon tanks which have been filled with slurry seals, and there shouldn't be any environmental issues with those, but they should probably be permanently located. Since I drafted my memo, we found this map which pretty well locates. And there also happens to be one smaller underground tank, above ground tank here, and a underground tank here on the site, just for reference. And there are 3 propane tanks located on the site here, large tanks that are full that would need to be dealt with.
Richard, so the options that we discussed at the pool meeting, where was the one that provided the most, or the least amount of parking
For the remaining, it would have been, we had one option along this side of the gate, one option along this side of the gate,
And then one more down
and
farther.
then one more over here.
So on here, what, do you have all 3 of those or no?
I just included the recommended one.
So, like where it says existing, so it doesn't really refer to the one that the JPA wrote.
Well, there wasn't I didn't get a specific request from the JPA. You were involved in the discussions that I wasn't.
So I think because what we were hoping for from the JPA is to get the bulk of that vacant.
About 2/3 of the lot.
On the other side of the gate.
I would say at a minimum from that side of the gate coming down.
How much parking does that give the pool?
That the option that I've outlined would give the pool
105 feet.
to 2.05 acres.
How many cars can you park there, though? I think that's the question they're asking.
In the existing parking lot?
No, with your
With your option.
option.
That would depend on the design of the pool.
Roughly ballpark, what do you think?
Well, maybe Mel knows how many parking spots do we have in the existing? Or probably,
10-foot lot.
Yeah, you can kind of count them out on the map.
yeah.
There's
So I would
45
say
there closer to the building, and then you have the motor pool feet. So it looks like there's about 55, 60 spots.
Right.
Is that enough?
For all of Mel's fleet?
For the pool?
It's,
And then we're considering moving out of that building, right?
we are.
Yeah.
I do think though it's worth
You don't want to destroy
considering the fact that even though we're moving out, somebody else is probably gonna use it,
I
and
get
probably
that.
gonna wanna use it all.
Probably eventually though, the pool.
Pool authority, I think,
Potentially.
yeah, long term, I think that would be a of interest. Right now, they've got to focus on the
Get
pool.
it built. Get it built.
They shouldn't be.
And now, another option that I don't know that's been discussed at the JPA level, but would be to deed the entire parcel to the JPA and then get a lease back for a period of time, maybe 5 years or something.
This possible.
Which,
I would have to say that I've been an advocate when we acquired the full property and just utilize the part we need, and allow the existing use to remain there for a period of time, no lease back or anything else. But the focus has been to work on it. And actually, I think it helped the discussion because your chart, or your idea, I mean, your presentation doesn't include that. But the idea of building, you got the old pool, it sits about right here on Roseville. It kind of consumes it. This is the parking lot to the existing pool. The pool, the new pool being built would be built roughly somewhere in this area right here, with the idea that eventually this building, when it's raised, would become parking for the pool itself. So in terms of defining a footprint here to give flexibility, pretty much from this point on down needs to be given consideration. It'd be nice to go even farther, but obviously if this is going to be here for the remainder of this year and going to be moved, it'd be one thing that's going to be here for the next 2 to 5 years, you know, in terms of utilization. Obviously you have to provide for some parking there, but the parking that would be here, even if the line was drawn at this point for development purposes, the use of that parking area, I mean, at least through next summer would be the earliest that something could be constructed in that spot, would still be available and could be utilized by agreement between parties. So as you wind down the use here, you know, the need for that parking lot. And when it comes down to storage of the motor pool fleet, how much do we actually, as you migrate from the site, in terms of just using that as a parking area for the motor pool, when maybe the motor pool parking could be located somewhere else on other county parcels if the necessity is there?
I think Mel would like to address that.
I'm sure she would. I mean, is that the only place we have to be the motor pool?
Well, that's been the sad story of every time Health and Social Services migrates to a new facility which is leased, is we downsize conference rooms and storage and parking. So consequently, no, we don't have space for parking, but which is not to say that it's not a possibility. The school, the County Office of Ed owns that lot there between, it used to be United Rentals, and I forget what the new name of it is, the rental guy or something, but between them and our facility at 1400 Chestnut. And right now it's a gravel lot. I don't think they have any plans for it. I imagine they would probably be willing to let us lease that for something and park there. But we do have more than 40 cars that we have to find places to park. And so we have a significant, right now, parked at Paul Bunyan, and a few parked at Chestnut, at 1400 Chestnut. We have we have one parked at 1600 Chestnut, and one of those there's another one that belongs to child support. But yeah, it's a lot of cars to park, and we will continue to have need for parking at that building for a while yet.
So, Jim, you guys are looking at putting in a new pool more so than,
The old pool is not going to be rehabilitated. And the reason why the pool board basically began the process with the elementary district, we do have an agreement with them that, in theory, it's going to, on the next agenda, the authority will be, supposed to be on the agenda to sign for is, somebody needing to take responsibility, because the school district owns the old pool site. They have no interest in maintaining it, they have no interest in abating it, and the city had an interest in it, but their interest is fluctuated, and so at some point in time, the building is going to have to be dealt with, and just not sit there and be an ongoing eyesore. So the JPA has felt, if we're going to this location where we want to go, but that would be true no matter what location. And it's important to note that there is no perfect location. There's issues with all 19 locations that we dealt with. Some of them are timing, and others are located. There's a variety of factors. And this would probably be, this location next to Washington School, which came out on top in terms of the evaluation, was the least complicated, but irrespective of that, this facility needs to be abated, and since no one really wants to be responsible to do that, the JPA board decided that, you know, somebody's gonna have to do it, we'll take it on if necessary. And, you know, as far as the other adjoining properties, you know, depending upon their ongoing use, we see the opportunity to expand and have, you know, more than just that basic footprint. This would be basically the initial starting point, but moving into where the city shop area is, if the city relocates their city public works yard, and that has been talked about in times past, whether it's a current consideration is, you know, remains to be seen, but there would be interest in that. Eventually, with the abandonment and non-county use of the Roosevelt School property, the building itself would be of great interest, whether the pool authority would take it on and find grants to rehabilitate it, or to, you know, abate it would be something that they would have to deal with in future times if and when they had the financial resources. But the lawn area, the grassy area, the site itself lends itself to providing, you know, park. I mean, that could evolve into in time to be a kind of a major park or recreation site. The potential for the old school to be rehabilitated into a recreation center, if grants could be obtained for it, you know, is a possibility. But those are, you know, we're not worried about what we're going to do 5 or 10 or 20 years ago. We need to worry about what we're going to do this year and next year, and that's where the focus comes back into, and that's where the request for seeding as much as feasible of that back parking area to Roosevelt School enhances the ability and authority to get the job done.
So Richard, how do we identify then of like the four directions, because there's, how do we make reference? I mean,
Well, we'd have to, the property's gonna have to be surveyed at any rate. If, you know, what I would suggest is that, you know, we can measure out, this is 456 feet, this whole line here. The board picks a point, or, you know,
when we pick that, though, after survey or before?
we could go out on site and determine where exactly we want to do it, have the surveyor mark that, measure it according to that. We could do it from a better aerial I could bring back. I would like to be able to figure out some way to maintain access to this building. For the sheriff's not here, and he had believed that he would probably like to continue access for that.
It was
boat storage.
suggested by Mr. Hancock, because there is an easement that comes off of Richmond Road there, is to create a kind of an access coming up through that way. Of course, you have that fuel tank that's in that one location there. But, you know, in terms of using that as the access to that point, rather than coming through the access off the north side, is another alternative.
Richard, you identified location of 3 underground fuel tanks. Where's the third one?
There's 2 here and 1 over here, 5,000 gallons.
And then the propane tanks you said
Right about
were
it.
there, is that to heat the Roosevelt School?
Larry can comment on that. I think it's for backup to the natural gas.
Actually, those can be removed. They would convert out natural gas there. They're no longer hooked up to the building, so we're in the process of calling it permanently closed as soon as we have.
Oh, they'll be removed either way.
Yeah.
Is the third tank, is it sealed?
All 3 of them are slurry sealed, correct?
And the above ground tank there actually is removed now.
Oh, it is, okay.
Yes, the tank is still there, but the tank is removed.
So, Jim, I mean, what's, speaking on behalf of, you know, the pool JPA, what do we want to try and get accomplished?
Yeah, I think what we kind of agreed to, it'd be nice to go here, but where the gate is here, actually, we're pretty close. It's just basically coming on this side of the line. So we leave the vast majority of this out, bring the line down here. So then we go down to the right. Yeah, walk back down here. Basically, you shave off about 3 of these parking spaces in each of those rooms.
And that's sufficient?
I think that would give us sufficient to get started, yes. We probably could make it work with what Richard's proposing, but it just becomes tight.
I think the question is, do you want it to be tight for the remaining county building, or do you want it to
Yeah.
be tight for the pool building? And that's the question you have to.
Well, you know, if the county building is looking to be relocated in the next 12 to 18 months, the pool authority isn't going to be having something happening there probably until next year. So, I mean, the spring of next year, summer of next year, so, you know, it'd be just a matter of a few months, and, I mean, that's the overlap there. Now, if the county's intending, even though we have good intentions, you know, the 18 months becomes 2 years or 5 years, then I think it becomes more problematic in terms of the tightness as it relates to the county. But I think on the, you know, the short end of it, you know, I think it's the hope and expectation that they're gonna be in better, newer, more efficient and effective quarters. And so that, to me, I think becomes a relatively non-issue. I'm not saying it's not an issue to the people who are directly there and affected, because it is, but I think in the larger scheme of things, it's a relatively non-issue. Like I said, I mean, you know, even though the transfer would take place, it's gonna take time to go through the construction plans and design and the bidding process and, you know, and so forth. And so during that time period, even though the transfer took place, there isn't gonna be an immediate need that you go out there and, okay, this, you can't touch this. I mean, I think the full utilization of that area will probably be enjoyed by the department at least through springtime of next year at a minimum. And that's assuming everything else comes together. And as the revergent clause is in there, you know, there are a number of things that could blow the whole thing out of the water at a drop of a hat. So we may be just, you know, arguing about nothing. So hopefully that won't be the case, but, you know, that's the reality. And at this point, we're probably as close to getting something starting and going as we've been in 10 years. And hopefully we don't lose that opportunity.
Well, Richard, personally, I'd like to see you sit down with Melody and the GPA and go over there and look at your options and report back to us. 'Cause, you know,
Well, I've essentially done that, and those are the, you know, I've said my piece. I mean, I think, you know, to move over here diminishes the value of the remaining parcel, you know, for whatever purpose it ends up being. But if that's the board's direction,
Yeah, I
that's,
think essentially what we need to know today is whether the county is willing to engage the JPA with this process. And, you know, I agree with Richard's assessment. I have no disagreement with it. The one thing I would request the board to consider is move that eastern, would be the eastern line of the lot line adjustment to the east side of the gate rather than the west side of the gate, as you see, that if you can visually see there at the top of the parcel. And I think that added square footage gives the JPA sufficient grounds to proceed without severely impacting, you know, the use of the building. And that's the only area of disagreement.
and, you know, one alternative I think might be to indicate to the JPA a willingness to transfer, you know, up to that amount of property and, but delay the actual transfer until there's a site plan developed.
One other thing I'd like to see.
Because I think that, you know, the acreage that the JPA has determined that they need is somewhat of an arbitrary figure.
On the conditions that you have there, the 1 through 6, I'd like to see a 7th one added on there if it would be possible too. And that would be to give the JPA basically the first right of refusal for the balance of the parcel all the way down to Richmond Road as a consideration if and when at some future time the county desires to dispose of the property, that the JPA be given basically first right to exercise the option to take possession of that in lieu of it being given to somebody else. And I think that's because of the potential for the long term. I mean, I don't think the JPA is, right now, that's a big consideration, but I think they're, down the road, if they're successful, I think that's something that's gonna be really important to them.
If we use this line here, Richard, like as a reference point, it leaves 47 parking spots.
Right. How many are you currently using, you estimate? That would be roughly a third of the existing parking
No,
lot?
that'd be 2/3 of the existing parking. Roughly, you have around 60 now.
Yeah, that would leave 47. I mean, right now, there's
And
about
retaining
18
wall.
cars in this.
Well,
The one issue is the gate.
Yeah.
The gate can't be moved because there's a retaining wall there.
No, and I don't think we need to move the gate.
As long as we would still have access,
Yeah.
there's probably adequate parking, and we will have to look for some place to put the rest of the fleet, but we were looking at that anyway, because we do intend to be out of that building.
So I think the gate doesn't have to be moved, and I think that during the time that there's the co-occupancy going on, that would be, because that's not gonna affect the, what would happen with the pool area anyway. So you just go in and veer to the left rather than veering to the right or going straight.
so we would then have
If you use this,
a gate.
Richard, what would your best estimation be? For the line? Let me just keep so there's
So,
like- Just that you're,
This is the Eastwood School.
that would be somewhere to this
This is
side
recreation.
of the gate.
No, not that far out, I would say just,
Well, I'm looking at Larry's map.
that, where that is at least 47 spot, that's where you should, Jim.
I'm looking at the gate above, so it may not take as many of the,
So this is 105 feet from here to here.
You're looking
So
at 16 more feet. It's gonna cost 16
probably 16, 18 feet is all.
it's bigger than that. If
And
that's-
that gate, I think, is a good 20 feet across there.
If not,
Yeah.
yeah, this is probably 20, the actual gate, but this fenced opening is probably more like 40.
Yeah.
Wherever the.
This is what I'm
Wherever the parking
suggesting.
is, like to retain 47
Okay.
spots.
On your-
that's the-
On your,
exact
Richard,
line.
on your visual one here that's in here, you can see kind of where that, the right side of that gate opening there is, and I'm just talking about drawing straight down from there,
Okay.
not moving past that.
Right, and then, how about the issue of access to the, so we've come down here like this.
Yeah, and then,
I'm concerned about access to this building for the sheriff's,
Just leave it not-
no, it's like this, it's notched out, so,
so we go something
Right.
like that.
exactly.
And then
Because
use-
that down there is not essential for, that's not, that
There-
part down there is not essential for the,
Okay. Well, one issue we've discussed is that this is where they store the boats, and so they pull up here and back into this building. And so we'd have to figure out what that turning radius is required there, but I can do that with the sheriff.
well, I mean, unless there's an assistance on the part of the county that be fenced off, I would suggest even though it's marked off, would be marked off, I don't think it's essential that we build, at least to start with, until we actually get a facility opened in that location, putting any sort of fencing in there at all. So that just, mitigates, you can use the whole area, for turning around. And once the facility is built and ready to be open, they're gonna have to fence it off for safety and security. And at that point, we can look at how maybe there'd be a second set of gates that allow them to be able to back into that. And then the question arises, is that, the only location for that particular shed? I mean, that evolved there over the years, but maybe there's, you have a whole county public works yard just right off below it, and actually, you can, that's the access on the other side. The door's not there, but, because the door's around on the north side. In terms of how that facility being located, whether it's kept there or moved. I mean, you have a sheriff parcel over by Sheriff Katie Lane. So I think those should be explored with the sheriff as well. I mean, in the meantime, I think obviously we want to preserve the access and option to it, no question about that.
Right.
Well, I guess what I'm looking for is direction. It sounds like the board wants to move the line to the
East.
farthest, the east side of the gate.
That would be,
And are the conditions that I outlined in there?
they're fine. Yeah, they're fine, and I would suggest adding a seventh one, is that the county would give the JPA first right of refusal if the county decides to dispose of the balance of the the Roosevelt School site.
We may want to discuss that with council. I think effectively what you would be doing is taking the decision of a future body and making it today, who they dispose of property to. I'm not sure that's something the board wants to do.
Well, somebody's gotta make a decision